Morning, everybody. All right, let me get my stuff. We're just gonna get started. Most people don't catch us live these days. Eventually, maybe. Probably have to do it in the afternoon for that to happen. Let me stand in front of this thing. Okay. I'm Sean Lewis. Got Vic in the back here with Easy Street Billiards. Thursday AMA. I have a list of topics. If you'd like to add to the topic list, go ahead and join the school group, which should be in the pinned comments. Free to join, free to post, free to get your information from me that you'd like to hear. All you gotta do is press the buttons appropriately. And I welcome any topics of conversation as well. All right, so let's just get started here. This is a little bit more of like a generalized conversation about how important it is when you're playing pool to be aware that you really need to be making choices all the time. And then that's really the game at the end of what's going on with your career or whatever is like really the culmination of all the choices that you made is what your pool game is like and how your life in the pool world is, so it's very important to just be as active as you can, thinking about what am I about to do? What do I really want to have happen? And choose, that life that you want to move towards as much as you can and not get kind of like kind of like bound up or like stuck in, some negative patterns or whatever. Pool's a great game where you can move beyond that. We're like, well, instead of making this poor choice where I'm like, sort of inflicting self-harm on myself by, missing balls I could make, knowing that I could make them and just like doing it wrong. And then, because I get a little bit loose focus or whatever, and that if I just build up a little bit more focus or whatever the thing is, then I won't have that issue anymore and I can move beyond it. And that's a choice you have to make. It's like, I'm going to do these things instead of being just like unconsciously just living it without really realizing you could change it. So I don't think that's, that much to talk about how important it is. It's very important. It's basically everything. It's easy to talk about though. Okay. Next. And if anybody is live, has anything to say, please, I'll make a comment. Vic's over here feeling all that stuff, chilling. And this is a short one. I think one of the things that's difficult to deal with in pool as you improve is that it's pretty normal, I think, to establish like a sense of expectation that you're going to be able to accomplish certain things because you've seen that it's still, you know what I mean? That it's like, well, I'm learning a shot. Now it's starting to be, pretty makeable. And that, at some point it should just be easy and I shouldn't have to try so hard to do it. And that there's an expectation that you've kind of like paid your dues in a sense. And I do understand that in somewhat. It does kind of feel that way because when you get better, you're like understanding what's going on increases, and that once you get to a certain level, then now it's more like automated. Oh, we got a fly in here. Maybe we should get the racket. You guys can know I'm joking. We're going to deal with the fly here. Hopefully the fly doesn't bother the stream too much. So, where was I? Talking about, geez, what was I talking about exactly? I have the topic, but it's like a little bit off from that what I was going to go with. Anyways, we'll move on then. If I'll remember it later, I'm sure. But as soon as I stop, oh, that's what it is. It's like you create the expectation that certain things are going to happen because you've gotten better. And then the reality, though, is that that's not really how it works, I don't think. To me, it's more like I've gotten better, and that makes the task more doable. But I still need to use a process that I understand deeply enough to be able to have like sort of like, okay, I've actually done it and done the work enough to automate the skill. However, when you're competing and your emotions are a little bit, tied up in it, then now that expectation can actually cause you to fail, because now you're not putting the energy into the action like you would have been, because some of your energy is focused on the situation. And it's not really exactly the same thing. That's the thing that I don't think people understand, is that when you're doing something at home by yourself, like playing pool at home and you're running racks at home and you're playing pretty good at home, and then you come to a bar or a pool hall, and then now you're playing in a tournament, or you may be playing for a few dollars, and now you think that it's going to be the same thing. It's not the same situation. And until you can be as comfortable in that situation as when you are at home, you can't really actually have the expectation that you can perform at that level. So much of pool is practicing your skills and then going and then testing them in a social situation where there's a lot of external variables that you're really not in charge of, and there's a human being applying their energy in opposition to yours. And then that actually is the thing that now you have to like work towards understanding, and work towards learning how to deal with when someone is trying to stop you from doing the thing that you can actually do. And now you're feeling the energy of that, just through the social connection of the contract, where like we're going to play against each other and I'm going to try to win, you're going to try to win, and I know that. And that changes the dynamic of what's happening beyond what it does when you're just practicing at home, and that's the element. It's interesting. And that I guess from where we're at now, my advice for myself and the thing that I've done to help me move beyond that is to kind of like reframe the game as being not that it's like we're both going to lose, or excuse me, that one of us has to lose. Is like obviously both of us can lose, is my point. The thing is that we can both win by understanding that you either win the game or you're learning a lesson from the other player through their exhibition of superior skill or tactics or whatever it is that caused them to win. Or at the minimum, you're seeing where you're failing in this situation that you feel like you can be more successful at, and that gives you direction as far as to aim your growth. And then now you can come back stronger. And through the competition and the social contract of doing that, you can grow from the experience. That makes it very much different than just learning how to do the skill at home just for fun. So this topic is dealing with the ups and downs. And I think that this is an interesting thing to where I think people ask me is like, well, how do you stay so relaxed and, and just in, not necessarily in the moment, but just I'm not as perturbed as some people are when I play pool. There's definitely times when you don't play as well as you want to. There's definitely times when you do play really good, and that it's an ups and downs things. You're going to have high points and low points in your journey in the game, and that it's important to zoom out a little bit with your lens of what's going on, so that you can see as early as you can in your career. If you're going to continue to play pool for a long time, then it's helpful to kind of like, okay, envision what's my, at the end of all that, what's my experience going to show me? Am I actually ever going to figure it out how to like just relax through the whole thing? Or am I going to continue to just allow myself to like hang on the result of every single shot? Because in pool, the ups and downs are the whole time. Every shot is an up or it's a down, and that if whatever the result is goes up or down based off that, and that you can't avoid the ups and downs of pool. That's just what's built into the game, the way that it is. And that if you just hang on the result of every single shot, your life is going to be way more up and down than it maybe doesn't then it has to be. If you can find a way to separate yourself from the result of the shot and then not have experienced the ups and downs as, as poignantly or as as vibrantly, like where you're like, that is what I'm here for, is to win or lose, versus a standpoint where I'm like just playing, and then now my goal is to actually see an opportunity to do it better than I maybe had before in the same situation. And that through just exploring my learning and growth and seeing how much I've grown and looking to direct my growth, then now it almost doesn't matter what happens, because as long as I get to shoot a little bit or observe another player playing at a higher caliber than I maybe can play myself, or that if they do some things that I really appreciate and admire, then I can like take that with like, well, that guy did this really well. I want to do that in my own game better, because I was actually enjoying what they were doing, and I think it'd be fun to be able to display that actual skill. And now you take yourself out of like having the ups and downs of winning and losing in competition and all that stuff, and you're like kind of taken where that's not the important part of the game. What's important to me, is learning how to just act more appropriately for the situation and relax and kind of like behave it like, just follow the ideals, as far as the things that I believe in, and that I want to learn from every shot and all that stuff. And so the ups and downs are not really there quite to the level that someone else may be. So for people that are like trying to, have a little bit more stability, then you just kind of have to refocus on what's important about the things that you actually have total control over, like your own behaviors. You can't stop, your opponent from playing great. You can't necessarily make yourself play great, not on purpose. You'd like to, but that's what we're there for, is to train and to learn how to change what we're doing and to make it more consistent and higher levels of precision, better tactics, better strategy, hopefully bringing a healthier body to the game, and all those things to just make everything work in the long run better and better and better. And just through you getting better, you're going to win more games, and you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to feel like it matters if I win or lose now, because as long as I learn something, then I'm going to advance. And then eventually the accumulation of those advancements will be undeniable. And then I will get my results that I wanted the whole time. And I will fade the emotional ups and downs to a certain degree. Okay, so in the lens of that last topic of dealing with the ups and downs, one of the things that is helpful, I think, would be to understand is that the ups and downs is like a cycle. There's an up part and then there's a down part, and you're just constantly fluctuating between those two poles. And that one of the things that's helpful, I think, for myself, because I mean, you're going to feel ups and downs, but really what you want to do, I think, is kind of like minimize the downs as far as their impact on your life. And then you don't want to act like it's the end of the world just because you missed the ball. However, you are allowed to like enjoy the satisfaction of doing good things when you're playing well, and you want to kind of like try to like stick more to the wins and don't dwell so much on the losses, if that makes sense. So one of the things that I think is helpful is that, if you feel like maybe you have a tendency to be too hard on yourself, or a little bit overly hard on yourself, and you want to learn a way to be a little bit less emotionally addicted to that negative emotion that you're cycling by having that like expectation, is that if you can think about yourself and how you're maybe concerned with not making a mistake, and then think about the alternative for someone and how it would feel if you didn't actually care if you made mistakes. Because the truth it is that through making errors, we learn how to correct from those behaviors, those mistakes, and that eventually leads us to growth. if kind of the way that life seems to be to me is you just keep going along until something breaks, and then you realize that actually needed to be redesigned maybe, or actually it was messed up the whole time and you just weren't paying attention, because there's other stuff to look at. You just kind of go along as you go, and then you start seeing things that need to get improved as they come up. And mistakes in pool are one of those things where you just keep playing as though you're going to play great the whole time, and then as soon as you make a mistake, then you realize, oh, that thing needs to be improved, and then now we work on that thing if it's important. So one of the things is have that framework in your mind, is that that's actually how it is, and that there's no reason to necessarily be like, so attached to these mistakes as being negative things. They're not negatives. Those all lead you to learning the thing that's going to advance you to the next level. It's like you don't remember as a child learning how to walk, but I'm sure that you fell many, many, many times. I don't even know how many times, learning how to do that thing. It doesn't stop you from, you didn't feel bad at that time. At some point we started attaching, our ego or whatever gets into the place where it tells us that it matters because, for whatever reason, like we're not less of a person because we make mistakes. We're actually, that's how it's built, is set up that way where we're supposed to make mistakes. And then now our goal is to learn from those mistakes. And now if we can learn from those mistakes and show that higher, that better behavior, then now we've achieved redemption. And now it's like it actually, not only is it like it never happened before, it's actually better than that because we learned the true lesson of the mistake and what it taught us in the long run. So if you can look at mistakes in that lens as a positive thing, then you won't be so disappointed when you do make mistakes. The thing that is then you're gonna have to focus a little bit more on is just being aware of what you're actually doing when you make a mistake, so that you can then like analyze what changes you might make. And but I want you to think about the feeling of how much more freeing it is if you don't think about how the consequences for your errors, but actually think about the advancements that you're going to make from those errors through the efforts that you're going to put in. So this is another one that's dealing with the ups and downs. I think that what's interesting is when you start to play well, it's almost like you get into a mode where you feel like nothing can go wrong, and then you almost like look for ways to make it to screw it up after a while, because it's almost gets boring how well everything is going, and that you make things harder for yourself by like not paying attention as much, or just being a little lackadaisical on the shot because you're so dialed in that you can get away with it. But you don't realize is that by getting sloppy, you're actually just making it harder. And when you had total control and you gave that away through your own laziness. And it's very important to understand that when you're in the zone, that it's not like a locked in thing. There's no locking in on the zone. There is, it's a balancing act. It's like an active participation in the current moment is what the zone is. As soon as you start to think about anything that isn't right now, right at this moment, you're starting to leave the zone, and up to a point where you start to notice how well you're playing. That is leaving the zone. You can't notice that because it's the zone is you are just capable of doing whatever comes next. You're not analyzing its value to your life at that moment. That's not the zone. It's an observer doing judgments and all of that stuff. The action that you're performing is just like, there's no good or bad about anything that you do. You're just doing what your intent was to do with no emotional context other than that. It's like, you're so into that moment that, you're in tune with what's going on, and it's almost like you're outside of the emotions, because emotions are generally, to me, centered around like focusing on what we feel about, a judgment about an object or a thing or an experience that we had. And that when we're in the moment, we are outside of that emotion, and that's where there's no like feeling good about it. It's just, it's amazing in a sense that everything is happening exactly the way that you want to. The thing is that as soon as we start to attach some sort of judgments to that, like even a positive or a negative one of any sort, then we are leaving the zone, because that is not, that's a mental exercise, and the zone lives outside of your mind, in my opinion. So one of the things that you have to do is you have to like learn about yourself in a way to know what kinds of things you do to self-sabotage yourself when things are going well, so that you can then enforce an on-purpose habit that will supersede that in these times of stress, like a tournament, or gambling match, or live stream, or whatever, or 100 people watching just randomly because that's how many people are around. I played in a tournament once, where it was like I was playing next to pros, and then other pros were like watching the other guy play. Not my match. It was just, I was playing some dude, but then there's like 3 pros over there watching Jose Perica play against another pro, and then you're like shooting, and then he's like watching you, waiting because you're taking up the space, and now all of a sudden everyone else is watching you too. And you're just like, we're off to the side briefly, but now all of a sudden everyone's watching, and so to like, one of the things that you have to do is you can't like label the whole situation with all these things. That just constricts your ability to like have the adaptability that you need to have to stay in flow with what's going on. You have to be able to like understand a little bit that all that stuff is actually just your awareness taking itself away from what's happening, which is that you're choosing, to make the ball go over there, and then, your cue ball ends up in a spot. And that's pretty much what you do. Everything that you like label is outside of that, the situation just makes it more complicated, takes you away from the simplicity of the action that you're about to perform. And then when you just focus on what's coming right next, which is that, when it's not my turn, then I will shoot again. And that whatever I'm supposed to do at that time, I will do. But right now I'm just chilling, and then when you're playing pool, you're just like, well, whatever I have to do, just stay in control of myself is what I should do on the table. If I make a mistake, I have to be okay with that. If I succeed, I have to be okay with that. So, and then in order to be okay with, the failures, a lot of times you have to shoot the right shot for yourself to not be on tilt if you make a mistake. If you shoot a shot, you shoot a shot, and then you screw up, it's so much worse than it's like, well, I don't know if I'm going to make the ball or not, but this is the shot that I'm choosing to shoot because of the values that I have, such that maybe I'm working on this shot in practice, and now it's come up, and I'm like, okay, I've been practicing this shot, and even though I'm not so good at it yet, but it's like, when am I going to learn how to be good at it? Am I going to wait, and then I'm going to shoot another shot that I might be really good at instead? But that's not going to show me that I learned this shot, which is what I've been practicing. So some of the time you have to just accept a little bit of like, the unknown. You can't always shoot the highest percentage shot that you have to create your percentages through shooting shots that are different than the ones that you normally shoot. That's how you advance, is by doing things you're not good at until you're good at them, and then you add more to that. And then in pool, there's really no limit to the amount of stuff that you can do like that. So yeah, end of the day, try to like find ways, redundant systems, stuff like that. Like I do breathing, I do mindfulness, I do relaxation, I do stretching, and then I have like a system that's very simple so that it's not overcomplicated, so I'll remember it very easily. All those things are just redundant systems to keep me in the present moment, where there's not so much to remember. It's very easy to automate, actually, and that's really what you want. You don't want to have to be so dialed in with your mind where like you got like 1,000 things in a row you got to concentrate and memorize. It's more like you just have it, you've done it enough times to where you can automate it, and then now you just have to live with it like that. What do we got here? There's a lot of stuff today. Okay, so this is a question or a thought experiment for y'all. When you're looking at an objective eye at your game, you should ask yourself, this is a question I ask myself, do I want things to be different, or am I happy with the way they are? And a secondary thing to ask yourself is, what can be done to make a change if I'm not happy with a certain aspect of my game or my game in general? I think that that's a good thing to ask yourself to help yourself decide how you're going to continue to improve at the game. Is that really, you got to just like, if you could just remove the things about your game that made you unhappy, what would be left? That's really what it comes down to. It's like, I'm pretty happy with my game because there's not that many things that I'm unhappy about. It's not that I'm happy about how my shot making, it could be better, but I'm not unhappy about it. So I'm okay with it, you know? And then for my own personal game, for instance, like, I'm not happy really about how my jumping level is not quite up to par with, I think, my overall skill. And that in order to make that not happiness, you know, become like, I'm good with it. And now actually then you can become happy with it eventually. You just have to practice it. So it's on my list of things to do. And I know that that will make me more happy overall with my game, because you kind of have some things about your game that as you progress, you know, there's some skills that are way up there and you're going to be pleased with your ability to perform, you know, and then other stuff that you're like, not so much. And that's all you got to do, is just be like, well, if I just remove that not so much, either through a perspective shift that it's like, I don't even care. So now why be unhappy about something I don't care about? That's useless, you know, or just be like, well, we're just going to get better at it because we need to feel good about this skill, you know. So think about that, you know, and then, you know, what can be done to make a change? It's very simple. You know, just work on the thing that you're unhappy about, take on that challenge, that hard thing, do the hard thing. Like, I don't like, so I need to work on it. I know I'm going to suck at it at the beginning. That's that's the path to mastery, folks. All right, this is a good one for like competitive play. I think people, you know, you go into a match and you're like, maybe you're playing really good leading up to it, you know, and this is a key match. And then when you get into the match, then everything just like isn't working out the way that you want it to, you know, and that some of that comes down to like, if you don't have a premeditated routine, then a lot of things you're leaving it up to chance, and that some of those things that can happen are going to put you on tilt. And that's part of the thing, is that if you don't have a stable system where you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to react in all these situations a certain way, then it's going to be common to fail a little bit at a time until we like put ourselves on tilt, and then really it starts to break down, you know. So what I like to think about is, before the match is going on, is kind of like preload what I want myself to be thinking about and looking towards, and all that. Like, you know, if you're playing in a key match, you're going to be like, okay, in this match, you know, then, and like create a couple scenarios in your mind about how it could go down. Because you never know. At the beginning, it could be like they could break the balls perfect and then have like an easy run out. They could run out and break and run, you know, and then you can dry break on your rack and it just leaves it wide open. Then they run out. And now you're down 2-0 and you haven't done hardly anything wrong. You just like, you can't always make a ball in the break, you know, but then now here you are. So you got to have like, think of, that's one of the potentials. So like, think about what you're going to be, how you're going to be at that moment in case it happens, so that you can then load in a positivity message for yourself. Be like, well, this has been you know, I've been in this situation before. I haven't done anything wrong. Who knows what's going to happen? Maybe they're going to be overconfident because now they have this 2-0 lead and everything is going right for them, and they're going to be looking for ways to self-sabotage themselves. And now all I have to do then is just wait for my moment and then just continue to play tough like I have been. I haven't not been playing tough just because I didn't make a ball in the break. You know, it's not really a failure. It's just one of those percentage things, you know, outside of my control, you know. And that by kind of like preloading scenarios like that one, for instance, you know, say the opposite scenario is true and now you are rolling. You're like, okay, cool. I got a little bit of momentum. And now what I'm going to just continue to keep the pressure on. And then my expectation is that maybe my opponent's going to like crack a little bit under the opposite situation. And you just have to like build a bunch of different like random scenarios in your mind, because if you think about the like longevity of pool, if you're going to compete, several times a year at minimum, all these scenarios are eventually going to repeat themselves. And it's best to just realize that it's the case and then load in your own like answer for that, in a sense where this is kind of like, well, my goal is to win at this. And in order to do that, I need to have a positive mindset. And thus, in all scenarios that exist possible in a tournament, which is only so many different scenarios, then I already know how I'm supposed to behave because I have this goal. And that's how I think about it, is that I'm always trying to find ways to be more positive about what's going on, because I know that that's what it takes to allow yourself to win when those moments where maybe you don't have a good percentage chance, or maybe the opponent has a significant lead, and it doesn't look good, but that doesn't mean that you can't just make the epic comeback, and then tell all your friends later about how I was down, whatever. And then he missed the ball. I ran out, I broke and ran, and then he broke and missed, and I played safe, and then I ran out, and now all of a sudden I'm winning, and that's a story that can be told. If you choose to have that ready to go, then it's much more easy to accomplish and imagine when you're actually in the heat of the moment, versus trying to recreate it, like trying to imagine that happening while you're down 8-1 against a good player, and now you have no idea how you're going to come back. But if you'd already thought about it, you'd have at least that, the fairy tale would exist, and you could use that as the kernel of a dream, which you could then turn into reality if everything goes your way, which you could act in accordance with that if you just have that vision. So this is another thing too. This is an emotional tip. I'd say that one of the more important things about when you start having charged emotions, either way, if you get too high or too low when you're playing pool, it can throw you off. So I would say that it's important to always be trying to go back to your center, and have that be part of your routine, is to find an emotional balance so that you can use that as your like foundation for play, so that you can then at least have like a baseline that you like to use. Is like, okay, this is where the level of emotion, or like not emotion, but like, some people want to be like a little bit more relaxed and slow, and some people have a little bit more built-in energy, but you want to like find that pace that you can sustain over the course of a weekend, because that's how long you have to be able to sustain that pace in order to win a tournament. So at least 2 days of playing several matches where you can summon a certain level of energy, ideally, and then use that as like, this is my best energy. And so you just gotta like kind of like find that through, and I feel like mostly that is kind of like close to the center, where you don't want to be too elevated, because I think the competition, to me, you kind of like have an extra amount of like adrenaline just at hand, because that's kind of how your body is, the fight or flight. It's difficult to be completely emotionless while you're playing, and not to, because I think that if you have like any level of empathy, you're going to feel your opponent's emotions as well, and it can throw you off a little bit, and then you can like end up with this like surge of energy. And that one of the things that's important is to learn how to like try to control your own responses to that energy, so that you can bring yourself back to your center and then ultimately play well, as a function of like, well, we know how to burn off the energy through like different activities, and then we can stay focused on the thing instead of like getting thrown off by how extreme the amount of energy can be, because there is a lot of like adrenaline can really, really throw you into a weird spot physically. So, and this is like a long-term project I'd recommend for people to experiment with is to think of the game as one shot at a time. So every shot, you, instead of like thinking about, okay, you say you're playing a rotation game and you're thinking, okay, I got to play, you know, and I got to run all these balls out. It's like, you know, in order, and that is what you're doing. The thing is that at the moment, all you have to think about is what's happening right now. So in a sense, in order to connect those balls together, you're repeating the same thing over and over again. And what you're really looking to do is find out what's the smallest thing that I'm repeating the very most often. And then I need to work on that first and then go from there. Because, you know, and to me, the breathing is the number one thing where, okay, if I can continue to keep good breathing throughout, then I can use that as the basis for all the movements that I make, because it creates like a kind of an energetic level that I'm going to exist at. If I'm hyperventilating the whole time or anxious breathing, it changes the way my body physically can act. So to me, the breathing is the most important thing to begin with, because it's the thing that happens the most. If you know, I hope that's obvious. Everything in pools is cycle. You're only hitting the ball once. How many times you're going to breathe between each of those shots? If your breathing sucks in that time, then that shot is going to suck more often than if your breathing was good. I hope that makes sense. It's not rocket science. I just think that it's one of the most difficult things that there is to do, is to control your breathing all the time. So it's a lifelong project, but I'd say that that's one good thing to do. And think of other opportunities of these simple things that you could be adding, like the breathing and other things that are repeating very often, and then learn how to improve those first before you start working on things that are like that don't happen so often, you know, like, you know, 3-rail bank shots or whatever, you know what I mean? It's like there's other things that really will take you a long ways further than you think by just mastering it early on in your career, because then you can just ride that forever and you can continue to enhance it as well over time. So, oh yeah, so as you're playing each shot one at a time, you know, then that helps you find a smaller cycle that exists, and then learn how to replicate that shot more, that, you know, that cycle more often, the pre-shot routine, etc. Very important things, because those are the mini cycles that lead you to then being able to put balls together, runs together, eventually, you know, packages, breaking and running, you know, where you're multiple racks, winning tournaments, etc. Like getting on a true roll because you've mastered one sequence, and then now you're expanding on that to like learning other shots that can allow you to continue to do the same sequence. But you have a framework that's very solid, that's manageable, that you're always looking to improve. So here's another thing too. I think that when we're not feeling our best, or maybe things are not going our way, then sometimes we can have like a little bit of a victim mentality. And then at that time, it's important to recognize that. And I think that it's a good idea to ask yourself, okay, well, what's actually happening right now? What is it, the reason why I'm even feeling this way, you know? And being able to identify that is a good way to kind of like get yourself back to realizing that it's not a big deal, and that whatever was happening was actually just kind of like a construct that we attached to. And that thinking about, you know, the thing that is in our way from being happy, and just being like, okay, well, in reality, there's nothing in our way from being happy. It's a choice that we're making. So part of the way that I choose to be happy is that when I recognize when I'm not feeling, you know, like something is fair or whatever, and then I realize that, well, it's my opinion for whatever reason that I'm feeling this way. It doesn't matter if it's fair or not, actually. What matters actually is how I feel about whether or not it's fair. And it's like, well, if it's not under my control, then there's not much I can do. So what I really need to do is actually just concentrate on feeling okay about the fact that it's not fair, because there's nothing I can do about it, instead of feeling like victimized by the fact that it's unfair, if that makes sense. So some of it's like, well, if I just reframed what's really going on, then I would be okay with it, because I know in actuality what I'm not okay with is the fact that I have no control. It's not the fact that there's any particular thing happening. The true amount of control that I have is actually that I just got to stop caring so much. It's not a big deal. Like, I'm only feeling uncomfortable because I'm choosing to, in a sense. The physical pain or whatever that you may be experiencing is not the same kind of thing as like an emotional choice to feel victimized. you know um, so this is another thing too. I think that people sometimes wonder about, like, how do you get to a high level at something, and how do you make something so, you know how do you do what you're doing? And I'm like, well, at the end of the day, what has to happen, to make certain things happen in your life, is you have to learn how to, in order to show that you love it so much that you're going to make it that important, is that you have to demonstrate that by not doing all the things that are stopping you from demonstrating that it's the most important thing. And that it's like, if you want to be great at pool, it's okay to love all the other things that you can do with your life. The problem is that in order to like be great at pool, you have to love it more than those things, enough to where you're choosing it over everything else more often than everyone else does, even though they love the game as well. Just like, I love it more than you. And not in the sense that the love is stronger, but in the sense that I'm giving more of myself to it than you may be doing. And that's one of the reasons why I may be more successful than someone else that loves the game, but only in as much as so much, because you're not demonstrating necessarily that you're willing to make sacrifices for that, because the game is actually more important than you are, in a sense. The more you love something, the more you have to give up to connect, to have the connection as far as your prior self. It's like, well, you loved other things, and there's only so much room in your day for activities, and the more you like put towards one thing, the better that thing is going to be. And that you have to understand is like, well, if you want to be great at pool and also have good relationships and a good job and all the other things, is that you have to like sacrifice things that could be done instead of the pool in order to make that happen, or you have to give up on all those other things that you really enjoy doing too. And it doesn't matter to any particular person. Like, I don't think that it matters to me so much, and I wouldn't think less of someone else if they're not putting in as much time and energy into the game as I am. And I wouldn't say you love it less. That's not really a good way to explain it. But if you truly have that desire, then you're okay with making that sacrifice, because that's what comes with wanting that thing. If you truly want that future to happen, then you have to be okay with all the things that aren't going to happen because of that choice, and just realize that you could have done all those other things, and you can imagine having done them and enjoyed it just as much as you would. But the thing is that you get to choose by doing things how your life is going to be. And you can imagine plenty of stuff that could make you feel good, and you don't have to do those things to know that they could have happened. And that's part of what it is with pool. When I talk to a lot of people and they tell me all these great stories about what they've done in their lives, and then that whole time that they were doing all those things, I was like hanging out in the pool hall, learning how to get better at pool. So I don't really have stories to speak of. I can tell them that I shot the same shot for 8 hours a day for a month or two straight, just because I thought that it helped my pool game. Meanwhile, they're going to Hawaii and doing different stuff, and having a great time. But, at the end of the day, I wanted to be a good pool player, and that's what happened. So it's okay that I didn't do those things, because I know I would have had fun. It's not about that. That's easy to have fun when you're not doing anything that's important. It's just part of I don't care so much, so I can enjoy myself. That's what vacation is. The trick is to like not care and still get things done that you love, because you have goals, and so you got to balance what you want to have happen in your life and make it okay to give up on certain other things, so that you can have what you really want, which is what you should be really trying to get, is what you love more, because it's like, well, it's more important to me to have that thing. Well, then you should really act like that's actually the thing that you love more than, and then not feel like you're sacrificing other things, because you're not. You're getting what you really want. And it's not like you shouldn't feel a negative, oh, I'm not getting to do these things because I'm playing pool. I'm like, well, you wanted to be a great pool player, so you should be happy to do so. It's not a sacrifice. You're in a sense you say sacrifice, but really the definition I like to use of sacrifice is really that you're just giving up the lesser for the greater, and yeah, the lesser can be fun, but is it really greater than the thing that you truly want as your life stream? Probably not, and it's not to make it like you can't make, choices to do certain things, because really, who really knows exactly what they want? You're allowed to experiment. That's part of it. But if you kind of have a good sense of like, okay, I want to be good at pool, then now you're like, well, am I doing what I need to do that by the time frame that I think is realistic or not? And then I'm like, well, if I really am not, then why? Do I really not like it as much as I thought? Is it not as much of an important thing as I thought? I don't know. You have to think about these things so that you can then have a little bit better direction, because pool is such a good game that you don't have to like try to be great at it to enjoy it. It's just like one of those things you have to think about, like, okay, do I really want to take this seriously, or do I want to just be recreational, because that will help you enjoy the game more based off of what you decide, and then that'll allow you to then guide what you do. And it doesn't mean that, just because your technique isn't as solid as mine doesn't mean you can't have as much or more fun than I am, at the game. That's the thing that's beautiful about it. You can get out there and you can enjoy yourself. The thing is that if you're trying to have goals, now you really have to start being a little bit more specialized about your thoughts, because now you're like, okay, I need to focus my actions to, accomplish my goals, and not just talk about like the things that I want. You got to do the things that you want to get done. Otherwise they won't just happen, and that's all just about making trade-offs with your time and energy. This is one other thing that I think is good. This goes back to competitive environment, dealing with the stresses and strains of competition and the emotions heightened and all the other things, is that once you start to feel the adrenaline, right? The adrenaline is, they call it the fight or flight response, right? So if you're in a situation where, you're feeling the adrenaline, and now you have this like enhanced, amount of like power basically, and that everything is very heightened and sharper, and you don't really realize it, but your sense of time, slows down to where you're thinking faster than you do when you're just relaxed. So understanding mechanically what's going on can help you realize that what you're receiving is power, in a sense that you have the ability to do greater things when you have this adrenaline than you do without. And the problem that people, I think, have is that they are trying to avoid feeling the energy, and that's what throws them off. You have to learn how to use the energy that you're getting productively, and not just try to go get through the moment. Because the thing is that people realize that after the intense situation's over, then the adrenaline will go away, and that's what they want. They want the adrenaline to go away, and a lot of that will then habitually, it's easier to fail and make it go away than it is to use it productively to win, especially in pool. Because at the beginning you don't know how to win necessarily. It takes a long time, and you still feel the adrenaline the entire way through. At some point you'll have to learn how to take that adrenaline and then use it to win, and that takes a while, because you need to have skills that are like a little bit more bulletproof in order to be able to use your adrenaline and use that power to win. But part of it is you got to reframe what's happening positively so that you can channel it and you can manage it properly, which is that you have an enhanced ability to do all the things that you need to do when you feel the adrenaline. You just have to learn how to do it. And part of it is knowing that it's happening, and then realizing, okay, this is the adrenaline, and this is going to give me these capabilities that I didn't have before, and I just need to use that instead of hyper focusing on the negative things that might happen and how scary it is to have all this energy. It's, the energy is not anxiety, it's not fear, it's adrenaline. It has a signature to it that's unlike those things. And if you compare it to those, then that's where you start thinking about fear. And now you're having enhanced, the adrenaline even starts to go further because partly is fueled in these situations, so you can cycle yourself down. You have to think of it like a good thing, is my point. Otherwise, it will be a bad thing, and that's not going to help you win. And you can't necessarily control whether or not you're feeling adrenaline. Once you have fear, you're feeling it. Now, the focus should be on managing it and not trying to avoid it or to make it go away. Most of those techniques that are those two things, where you're avoiding that or making it go away, have to do with losing quickly and horribly. And that's not really what we're going for. Once you learn how to manage your adrenaline, then you can get through it, because it only lasts so long before you learn how to reframe things positively, and then it goes away because you realize there's no one actually attacking you. There's no lions and tigers jumping out of the jungle to get you. You're actually just chilling in a public place playing pool with somebody, and you're feeling all these crazy emotions because you signed up for this competition, and now you're learning how to deal with it. And that adrenaline is what you're here to learn how to deal with, because your skill isn't really represented well if you're feeling adrenaline until you learn how to do that. And that's what you're there for. So this is what I'm trying to help you with, is just realizing that that extra emotion and extra energy that you feel is actually a good thing. And you just have to learn how to channel it. It'll make you more accurate. It'll make you be able to do all the things better. You just have to hyper focus on what you're doing and not what you're afraid of. So this is another thing too. This has to do with mistakes, dealing with mistakes. This is going to be the last topic of the day. Appreciate everyone that's made it this far. So this is, how do I want to deal with the failure and adversity that comes with pool? I think this is a big thing. I think that if we really thought about this and came up with a detailed explanation of all of the answers of like how we're going to deal with all our mistakes and how we're going to deal with all our failures in pool and how we're going to frame those positively, then we would be enjoying ourselves most of the time. In fact, pretty much all the time, because the thing I think that throws most people off is actually just the failures and the mistakes. The rest of the time, you're having a good time. A lot of people will just battle through the failure and the mistakes just to have those few great shots that they shoot, that they can be like, I did some amazing stuff. And it's true, because pool is tough enough to where certain things are very difficult to accomplish, and that you can feel great about it. The thing is I think that what throws people off and makes people, really struggle at trying to get better and take it seriously is the fact that you're going to constantly, as you get better at pool, you start realizing that as your depth of perception increases, that you'll never be able to not see how you're actually always failing a little bit by just not quite getting to the place you wanted to go. And it's just like dealing with that constancy is really a thing that I think separates people from being better than they could be, is that at the higher level you get, the more you see that you could be doing better and that you need to continue to advance your technique in order to, but then as you advance your technique, then you start to see that you could even do more, and that you're still know that you're failing constantly. And almost it's to a sense where the better you get at pool, the less you really know about what's going on, because you realize that there's so many more things that you have no idea how to do that could potentially be possible as you start to, the game gets unveiled to you. Once you start being like, oh, I can do these things, and now you're like, oh, whoa. Then you can like add different elements to that, and then it just continues on into infinity, into a point where you're like, dang, I really didn't know anything ever, and there's so much more that could be done, and that can be a daunting thing to face, knowing that that's actually how it is, and that a lot of it is like, well, the fact that we're dealing with that is like not really a bad thing. I think dealing with adversity is one of the things that makes us stronger humans, and that's one of the things about pool that's amazing, is that you can put yourself in these situations where you're feeling the adversity because you're competing against another player that's trying to win. I mean, that's always adversity. I'm trying to manifest victory for myself. You're trying to manifest victory for yourself, and then we're in direct opposition. What's going to happen? Well, this is adversity for both of us until one of us shows that they are not feeling adversity. And if the other person feeling adversity, they're probably going to lose. So part of it is like dealing with that is like, well, you know, this is part of the game. This is why I signed up for. I'm actually hoping that you put me in a bad place so I can learn something. That's my mentality. If I just beat you, I might not learn anything, but if you teach me something, I'll be better tomorrow because of it. And if I don't, then I'll just win, and that's fine too. It's just the way it works. You know, it's like I'm trying to learn how to play better by making mistakes. And if I don't make mistakes and you don't show me that I'm making mistakes, then it's harder to learn. So that's why I'm rooting for you harder than I root for me, because if you play better than I do, then I'll learn something from you. And if I play better than you, then I might not. So I'm, you know, if I win, it's cool. But I'd rather learn because that's how I got better. You know, part of learning is like, well, you learn how to win just through learning. Okay, that's it. Appreciate everybody for your time. Hope you see some of these reels and enjoy them later. And as always, any comments are appreciated. I always want to talk about stuff and help people with this game. There's so much to talk about, and I'll definitely put a couple things on the list for you if you can. And have a great one. Thank you.